So I'd like to welcome everyone to the October meeting of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. A lot going on at City Hall that our main speaker will be discussing, Councilman Paul Koretz. But there's a lot going on with redistricting that Bob will be talking about, preservation of the single family neighborhoods, Maria will be talking about. So I'd like to get started by asking the board members to introduce themselves. First up is Matt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Epstein. I'm co-vice president of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association, and I'll be moderating your questions tonight with the council member.
Okay, Jules.
Hi, everybody. This is Jules Fear. I'm vice president of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association and honorary mayor of Sherman Oaks. I'd like to remind everybody that once again, SOHA will be hosting the 23rd annual toy drive at Gelson's Market in Sherman Oaks on Van Nuys Boulevard. It's going to be Sunday, December the 5th from 11 to 2. We expect a number of elected officials to be there, right, Paul?
I'll be there, I'm sure.
See, and others, and so please come by, drop off the gifts for these kids. It's important that you attend this, as you do every year. We have very good attendance. So once again, this is our 23rd year of doing this.
Okay, so that'll be outside in the front parking lot of Gelson's.
It will be.
And people will be asked to bring unwrapped gifts.
Unwrapped toys, yeah. And also for those of you that don't wish to get out of their cars, you can pull up at the curb or you can pull into the parking lot, and we will have volunteers there from the Department of Children and Family Services to receive the unwrapped gifts from you.
That's great.
Okay, and they'll be getting more information before the event. Next up is Tom.
Hi, Tom Glick, board member since 2017. And thank you for coming tonight. Look forward to hearing our speaker.
Okay. John Eisen, is he online?
I'm here. Hi,
Okay.
I'm John Eisen. I'm treasurer of the association. And I'm looking forward to an event where we can actually get together outside in person rather than on Zoom. And hopefully next year we can have meetings like we used to be together.
Okay, next up is Maria.
I'm Maria Calban, and I chair the legislative committee, and I chair United Neighbors, a statewide coalition of neighborhood groups.
Okay, you'll be talking later. Marshall Long, is he online?
Marshall didn't make it tonight.
Okay, next up is Nancy. Is she online?
She didn't make it tonight either, computer problem.
Okay, Jay, did you make it?
Let me think. Yes, I did make it. I did make it. I'm Jay Weitzler, because everybody has to have a job. Although I don't take dictation, I'm the secretary of the organization and also the representative to the Hillside Federation and along with Jules, the representative with the Buckley School. And speaking of the Buckley School, they have their annual or semi-annual theater arts presentation where they're doing a play called The 12th Night, which some of you may have seen on or off Broadway. And it's the 11th, 12th, and 13th of November. They'd love to have the community come and see their students in the play. So if you'd like to go spend a couple hours up at Buckley, it's going to be outside. Contact the Buckley School. I'm sure you know how to reach them. And get yourself a cheap ticket to a fun entertainment. Let's support the people in our neighborhood.
Thank you. And that's the board. Next up is LAPD Detective Saul Paradis, who will discuss the domestic violence problems we're having in the city of Los Angeles. Detective?
Thank you for having me. Detective Saul Paradis here working the domestic violence table at Van Nuys. As we know, this is Domestic Violence Month, and I wanted to let you guys know on an average, 20 people physically get abused by their partners every minute. That kind of breaks down to 10 million a year, and 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men And unfortunately, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men are severely physically abused by their partner. We categorize our domestic violence here at Van Nuys with simple assaults and aggravated assaults. The aggravated assaults are basically when it's of serious injuries such as strangulation, loss of consciousness, broken bones, and stitches. And unfortunately, right now, our ags in Van Nuys are up 22%. And a lot of this domestic violence is also, it could be physical, psychological, and ultimately result in the ultimate sacrifice, which is death. Domestic violence affects everybody, all people, regardless of age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion. And it's very important that we identify these signs because unfortunately, a lot of times victims are reluctant to come up and step forward because they're afraid to be identified as victims of domestic violence. One of the resources that we have here at Van Nuys, we have a DART team, which is a domestic abuse response team, which is composed of a sworn officer and a civilian social worker advocate. And I would like to give you their numbers. Their number is going to be for the advocates 818-374-0050. And for the officer, it's going to be 818-374-0059. And with this advocate, she's able to provide counseling, legal aid, free of charge, and even provide housing for victims of domestic violence. I've also sent Officer Saldana a flyer. Right now, because of the COVID situation, all our clerk offices are made by appointments. I sent the flyer to Mr. Anderson, but I'll give you the number as well so that way you have it. All our appointments right now for like emergency protective orders, all clerk appointments are going to be at 818-901-4600. Ultimately, what we have to do is identify signs. If you see people who are not stepping forward, they're not in their normal social gatherings, reluctant to come out, we got to provide these resources. You can reach out to the numbers of our DART officer or advocate, and we also have a 24-hour hotline, which is 1-800-799-SAFE. Once again, 799-7233. And it's just paramount that we're observant of one another. When we see somebody that needs a little bit of help, reach out to these numbers so we can give them the resources that they need. It's a very difficult stage, and it's a cycle that needs to be broken, and it's gonna begin by helping one another out. Are there any questions from the board?
Well, I guess we don't have any ability to have the questions. Any other points you want to make before we go on
Just
to the next speaker?
ultimately, it's just very important. This is domestic violence that affects, like I said, everybody of all ages and gender. It's very important to identify it. You know, it's sometimes very silent to the point where it's not necessarily. It starts like this. It doesn't always start off as physical. It could be minor to the point where it's controlling, jealousy, and those are all signs. When you see those signs, somebody being possessive, how you do your finances, you know, let me see who you're talking to, preventing you from doing what you're doing. Those are all initial signs of domestic violence. It is very important to identify those signs. And when you do those, make sure that we provide guidance such as counseling or friends, support for these individuals. Or if not, being able to give them the counseling needed to overcome these obstacles.
Thank you very much.
My
We
pleasure.
appreciate your participating.
Thank you.
Next is Assemblyman Richard Bloom. He represents the district directly south of Mulholland Drive. And he was one of the few assembly members that had the backbone to vote no on SB 9 and SB 10. So if you want to give a little introduction, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to say hello and introduce myself to folks in the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. I've been around these parts for a long time, all but the first three of my years on Earth. I've been in Southern California, and I've lived in Santa Monica now since 1981, when my wife and I bought the house that we still live in today. I was heartened to hear Detective Paredes speaking about domestic violence. I practiced family law for approximately 30 years, and I saw way too much domestic violence that tore apart so many homes. It continues to be a big problem and one that we need to be vigilant about, as the detective said. When I was after I was living for about 10 years in Santa Monica, we settled into our Sunset Park neighborhood, and I became the founding member of the Friends of Sunset Park, which is our local neighborhood group. So I have a great affinity and understanding of the importance of neighborhood associations and what they bring to the table. And I'm always pleased to be able to speak with and dialogue with folks in neighborhood groups. Well, you know, and that's whether we agree or not, they are a place for dialogue and discussion, and that's extremely important for our public process. I served on the Santa Monica City Council for nearly 14 years. I was mayor 3 times, mayor pro tem twice. That covered about half of the time that I was on the council. During that time, I was appointed a California Coastal Commissioner. I was chair of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, and for several years, chair of the West Side Cities Council of Governments. In 2012, I had the good fortune to be elected to the California State Assembly. It was a very close election and very closely watched around the state. Since that time, it's now, I'm going into my 10th year in the legislature. I've become a leader on environmental issues, on housing issues, on the reduction of plastics in our environment, on dealing with toxics in our environment. I also have a very important appointment. My chairmanship is of what we call Budget Subcommittee number 3, but it covers natural resources and transportation. It's an extremely important and big part of our budget. I was appointed to that position back in 2013 and have been reappointed in every legislative session since. Do we cover 3 minutes already, Richard?
Bob Anderson says yes.
3 minutes, 17 seconds.
Okay. One final question.
There's obviously a lot more to talk about, and I look forward to more comments.
Here's the question.
Yes.
What pressure were you under when you decided to vote no on SB 9 and 10?
From which side, Richard? There was a lot of pressure from both pro-housing folks and from neighborhood associations. Both were very well organized. You know, I just made the best decision that I felt I could. I didn't think that SB 9 was the right solution for a very real problem, the housing affordability crisis. And I had some serious problems with the specifics in SB 10.
Oh, thank you for your help. And we look forward to seeing you in the future and at the toy drive, for instance.
Sounds good.
Okay, next up is Andy. Andy Solomon, who is the neighborhood prosecutor, an attorney representing the city attorney's office in our community. Andy, what's happening of interest?
Thank you, Richard. So I am from the city attorney's office. I'm your neighborhood prosecutor, as Richard introduced me. I deal with a lot of the long-term projects, the problems that can't be solved with the regular traditional prosecution. I want to report very briefly to you guys on something I mentioned 5 months ago, back in May. We had the Woodman, which is a bar and a restaurant on the boulevard. We had several minor offenses, but in May we had a shooting. And as you all know, that was very interesting to me, to say the least. I have been working with LAPD, with Council District 4, and we've been working on what caused the shooting, essentially what caused the environment that would allow people who would shoot other people to come to the boulevard. That was my number one concern. Since then, we have been, LAPD's established a very close relationship with the owner. They've identified some people in management that were problematic. Those people have been removed. They have had several positive contacts with the Woodmen, and I've been working with you guys too in the neighborhood council in Sherman Oaks and the committees that are made up to examine the Woodmen and other businesses in the area. And essentially, we're coming up with some lists of things we'd like the business to do to continue positive behavior and positive environment, creating a positive environment on the boulevard. That's moving along really well, actually. We have not had any more issues since we've really started closely looking at the Woodmen. We have not had any more issues. I'm still watching, and so is LAPD. But if you have anything to tell us, let the SLO know or let me know. That's the biggest project I'm working on in Sherman Oaks. I think that's of utmost importance.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next up is Alex Nassif. She is the deputy for our councilwoman and for Sherman Oaks. Alex, what's happening in Sherman Oaks from your point of view?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good to be here with you all. As Richard said, I am Alex Nassif, your field deputy for the Office of Councilmember Rahman. LAWA has proposed that they will be moving forward with FAA's proposed fix to Flight Pass leaving Van Nuys Airport. We realize this is a very contentious issue and good news for some and bad news for others, and we look forward to continuing working with constituents to come up with solutions to mitigate airplane noise from both Van Nuys Airport and Burbank Airport. Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council Movies in the Park is back. It's happening this Saturday. They will be showing the movie Hocus Pocus. You can claim your spot at 6:30. They're encouraging everyone to wear their Halloween costumes and show up a little bit early to get a good spot, and the movie will begin at 7 p.m. This governing body and all of you all have done a really great job at advertising, but the redistricting meeting, the LA City Council redistricting meeting is happening tomorrow at 6 p.m. and another meeting next Thursday at 6 p.m. You can find the link to the meetings at laccrc.org. And last but not least, we will begin servicing Ventura Boulevard once a week with our LACC clean team and hope to add power washing to those services within the next couple of weeks. It's tough to having one set of eyes and ears, so it's really appreciative when you all send us locations to send our LACC team. So thank you to Matt Epstein for that. And if you would like to get into contact me, you can send me an email at Alexandria, my first name, .Nassif. That's N as in Nancy, A, S as in Sam, E, F as in Frank, at lacity.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Ryan, deputy for Assemblyman Nazarian. Ryan.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan, and I am the Sherman Oaks field representative for Assemblymember Adrin Nazarian in the 46th Assembly District. The Assemblymember is still in adjournment until the middle of January, when the legislature will reconvene in a new legislative session. Our office is very busy with district office events. Again, the Assemblymember is continuing to think about what type of bills to introduce in the upcoming legislative cycle, so if any of you have any ideas, of course, I will leave my contact information in the chat. That way, I'm more than happy to discuss any bill ideation you all may have. We recently had a tenants' rights workshop. Advertising housing is key. This is the $5.3 billion state program for both tenants and landlords to pay for outstanding rent due from April 2020 until now, and even 3 months into the future. And it also helps with unpaid utilities as well. So that program is open, and our office is continuing to help folks with EDD cases. If you don't know where your stimulus check is, or if your friends, neighbors, family don't know where their stimulus check is, our franchise tax board liaison can actually give them a direct call and give them a status over the phone. We can also help with anything related to the DMV and anything else related at the state level. Last thing, our office is having additional self-defense, women's self-defense classes over Zoom. Last night we had about 40 folks show up. We did physical self-defense over Zoom. It will occur again this Saturday and Sunday with our women's self-defense instructor, Jean Morrison, 10:30 a.m. to 12. And I'll share that information with Bob and Richard. That way you all can know about it. So I'll leave my contact information in the chat, and I look forward to the meeting tonight. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Next up, our senior lead officers, Jose and Marina. Jose, why don't you lead off?
Good morning, Richard. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Officer Saldana. I'm the senior lead officer for the southern portion of Sherman Oaks. I cover everything south of Ventura between Coldwater and Sepulveda. We've been having a couple of burglaries from motor vehicles and on Ventura Boulevard, but mostly also a couple of burglaries just south of the boulevard on the residential between Cheltenham. Just sporadic, about 4 or 5 of them. It's been pretty hectic this last couple of weeks, but we've been sending out our undercover officers in the hills. We've been sending out certain specialized units to assist in capturing these suspects. And actually, I'm pretty proud to announce that our volunteer surveillance team on October 18th, we put out a flyer of a wanted suspect who was pretty much snatching purses from elderly ladies that were shopping at Costco and people who were not paying attention to the purse. So this guy was very good on taking these purses from these victims. So we provided this information to our volunteer surveillance team, and armed with their information, they located the vehicle and the suspect at the Costco parking lot. They notified our police personnel, and with their directions and their assistance, we were able to apprehend a person that was wanted. So I just want to say thank you for our volunteer surveillance team, and but overall, our crime rate is still pretty good. We're pretty much average from last year, and I'm kind of happy that we also have our new senior lead officer, Officer Romo, and I'll pass that to next to her.
Okay, Officer Romo.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Senior Lead Officer Mariana Romo. I am the new permanent Senior Lead Officer for the northern part of Sherman Oaks. If you look at my partner's background, I am the pink side. So I basically cover from the 405 east to some parts of Chandler and Magnolia South. My west boundary is Fulton and Coldwater area down to Ventura Boulevard. Just a few quick crime stats. For my area, we are down on aggravated assaults, which is fantastic. We're down 17%. But what we are up is on burglaries, property crimes. As of last year we were up 71 burglaries. This year, we're 110. They're high up, and I truly believe that they're up because in the year 2020, last year, we were all quarantining, trying to stay away. But now that it's 2021, we're slowly going out into the world and being away from our homes. I believe that's a huge reason why. I would like to remind everyone to, if possible, install video surveillance systems, trim your trees and bushes away from the house. The cleaner the house looks, the less that the burglars will go into the residence because they don't want to be seen. Install exterior motion sensor lights. Keep windows closed and locked at all times. Close and lock all doors, and especially the garages. Sometimes I drive around and conduct extra patrol, and I see the garages up and they're open and nobody's around. Please close them when you're away. Lock your side gates and rear doors. A lot of our burglaries the burglars are going in through the side gate, and they're breaking in through the rear sliding door. So make sure it's closed. But a huge one is I'm still looking for to beef up my neighborhood watch. If you're a block captain in my neighborhood, I'm still trying to get to know everyone. Please reach out to me. Please email me or call me at 818-731-2563, 818-731-2563, or email me at 40229 at LAPD, at LAPD and let me know that you're my block captain for a certain street, and let's reach out and communicate and have our next neighborhood watch meeting. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. And if you see me out there,
Thank
please
you.
stop me and say hi.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is Maria is going to give a short update on what's happening with the neighborhoods, single-family neighborhoods. And they're going to turn into mixed neighborhoods of apartment buildings. And I know in the next newsletter, you're going to have a lot to talk about. So if you can just briefly bring us up to date, because Bob has explosive information.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody knows SB 9 and 10 are now signed by the governor, and come January 3rd, they're going to be law. We expect hundreds of permits to be pulled at that time for lot splits and the building of multiple units for a lot. There are some provisions in SB 9 that allow for some local control, but the city must act on these in order for them to take effect. So we have a working group of former city planners, including our own Tom Glick, and attorneys, and we're working on an ordinance that would address these local controls. And we have Councilmember Koretz tonight with us, who championed the resolution for the city to oppose SB 9 and 10 during the summer. And we're certainly hoping that he will introduce our motion to the council. It is our only chance to get some protection for our communities from this free for all that will happen under SB 9 and 10. So we'll keep you informed, and that's my news.
Maria, can I ask you a question? Can I ask
No,
Maria
we
a
have
question?
to hold up. We don't have time.
Okay,
Next up is
I tried.
Bob Anderson. Bob Anderson, who's been spending days and nights listening to redistricting hearings. What's happening and how does it affect Sherman Oaks, Bob?
Well, Richard, it's pretty exciting. Redistricting of the city council started in November and December, and there have been all sorts of meetings. I've gone to about 15 of them, and it's been a real experience. They started out looking at various maps, various ways to move the council districts around, because the census changed. The valley got more people compared to the city. Some districts got bigger, some got smaller, some were undercounted. And they've gone through, I don't know how many maps, maybe a dozen. And last night they approved the final amendment to a map, and tomorrow night they will be hopefully changing that map just a little bit and adopting it to send to the city council. And it will go to the city council next Friday, October 29th. And for any of you that might be interested in that map, I will show you what it looks like. And it looks a little bit difficult to understand. This colored area is the Los Angeles map. That little piece sticking down there is San Pedro. And right about in the middle, you'll see Sherman Oaks. And this is the new district as recommended by the Redistricting Commission to the City Council. We would be in District 3, not District 4. It would be Sherman Oaks. To the east of us would be Valley Village. Here would be Encino. Here would be Tarzana. And here would be Woodland Hills. And it's an all-valley district, which Sherman Oaks is happy to be in. We haven't been completely an all-valley district for 20 years at least. And this district underneath us in green is the commission's recommended map for our speaker tonight, Councilmember Koretz. And the map, a little bit bigger picture to show you where it is. It goes all the way from the Hollywood Freeway across the 405 all the way to the West Valley. Now you say, what's going to happen next? And folks, I really wish I could tell you. It's very hard to figure out what the council's going to do with this map. They usually change it a little bit. Sometimes they change it a lot. We just don't know. So this is probably not the last map we're going to see. It may look a little like it, it may not when it's all over with. And maybe we'll have a few questions for the council member about that to get his opinion. But by the end of this year, it will be done by the council, sent to the proper authorities, and these new districts take effect on New Year's Day of 2022. So a couple of months from now, you're going to be in a new district and maybe even have a new council member. So it's sort of exciting. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to now introduce our speaker, Councilman Paul Koretz. He was our assemblyman for a number of years, and he was our councilman for a number of years. And now he is adjacent to us. He represents Encino. He's south of us, representing areas south of Mulholland Drive. With that, I'd like to introduce Councilman Paul Koretz.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Richard, and thank you to Bob Anderson and everybody else on the board that invited me to be here tonight. Sherman Oaks hasn't been part of my district for a few years, but I still consider it a community close to my heart. And SOHA remains one of the most important community organizations in the entire city. And you always display a level of intensity and engagement that is the envy of most other neighborhoods. And I always try to stay a little bit involved and at least show up to the holiday gift giveaway to disadvantaged kids, and hope to be there this year and perhaps joining you in a couple of other things. I've been asked to talk about a few issues of concern to Sherman Oaks and take some questions. I don't know if I'll get too much further than SB 9 and 10 before you want to give me the hook and have me answer questions, but let me start with that. As most of you know, after 3 years of trying unsuccessfully, the legislature recently approved these two bills that seriously erode local control of basic land use decision-making. And ever since Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco began pushing bills to allow higher densities in single-family neighborhoods and near major streets statewide, or removing most of the discretion local cities have always had to make these decisions for themselves, I've been one of the leaders trying to stop them. Senator Wiener has said from the beginning, single-family neighborhoods are immoral, and he's really been working to destroy them. And with this, he begins to succeed. For a couple of years running, we've been able to block several of his bad bills with a concerted effort of a coalition of local governments and community activists and groups. Among these bad Wiener bills was a bill to keep bars open until 4 a.m. I definitely led the statewide charge against that for 2 straight years. This year he gave up, but now that he's gotten SB 9 and 10 through, I suspect he'll come back with that next year. Once the pandemic hit, it was much harder for us to work to block the SB 9 and 10 predecessors. They actually passed at midnight of the last day of the last session last year, and they ran out of time to transmit it back and forth between the state Senate and the state Assembly. This year, we also had to mobilize the council without my strongest partner on these issues, which is David Rue. And with him gone, it took much longer to rally the council to oppose the bills this year. Along with our statewide network, I think we fought bravely, but the legislature caved in and passed these bills, much to the dismay of all of us. And SB 9 and 10 do some things we won't have much control over. They do them under the false pretenses that by building more luxury market rate housing, that will somehow trickle down and create affordable housing and reduce our costs for the people that can't afford housing, even with full-time jobs, and contribute to our homeless crisis. SB 9 allows the owners of single-family lots to subdivide them and build 2 or 3 homes on each new lot, depending on the methodology. Theoretically, they could also add ADUs, so that could add tremendously to the density in our single-family neighborhoods. and this would require no affordable units. SB 10 allows for any lot within a half mile of a transit corridor, like Ventura Boulevard, to accommodate a 10-unit apartment building plus ADUs, still with no affordability requirement, except on larger buildings than that, which I think means developers won't build larger than 10 units. With SB 9, we have the ability to adopt an implementation ordinance that could mitigate some of the terrible impacts of subdividing so many single-family lots. And we're just beginning to look at what we can do. And your committee may already either be working with my office, or we're both doing the same thing. So I'm not sure which it is, but we intend to try to address this head on. One of the galling things of this is it also reduces parking requirements. So we'll have more density and less parking required, which is all in the theory that if you stop providing parking, people will stop driving, which I think may work 30 years from now. But right now, all it does is make the fight for available parking worse and make our neighborhoods less livable. Also, there's a theory that if you build near transit, it will create more transit riders. In reality, it often creates fewer transit riders because we've studied LA. We found most transit riders are of lower income. Doing these developments often displaces people of lower income. And so we're building next to transit, but we're building it for people that buy new units, and new units by definition are unaffordable for almost everybody. So we're not going to get any increased transit use. We'll reduce our parking. None of this is very positive. We also will take small single-family homes with lots with lawns and trees, and we will remove all the green space and trees, contributing to our heat island effect. So while the argument was that this will help climate change, it'll do exactly the opposite. So it's all very unfortunate. I can't offer you too much hope. I can tell you that one lawsuit has been filed with, I think, a reasonable expectation of prevailing against SB 9. I expect one or more to be filed against SB 10. But in all likelihood, these could transform neighborhoods in the coming years and not for the better. Another wrinkle is the city's new general plan housing element, which will be coming before the council's planning commission soon. They've proposed to upzone a bunch of locations in the city to address our housing shortage. But what they don't do is they don't take the increased zoning for SB 9 into account. So we're required to allow all this additional density, but we're not capturing it to help us achieve our numbers that we're required to. So this could have us even producing more market rate, non-affordable housing than even the state calculates that we need, by combining that with all the excess that will be created by SB 9 and 10. So we will want to work with you and other HOAs and community groups to make sure that we do this in such a way that we don't, in essence, double count all this housing and create a requirement for ourselves that makes us overdo it. So I hope that any of you that are interested in these issues learn more about the housing element. Let the members of the Plum Committee know what you think, which are Marquise Harris Dawson, who chairs the committee, Gil Cedillo, Bob Blumenfield, Mark Ridley Thomas, who will be replaced as a suspended council member, and John Lee. And if you need any of their contact information, you certainly can contact my office. And we hope to work with SOHA, especially as a leader in this arena, to help us mitigate some of the damage that could be done by SB 9 especially. Briefly moving on, we're facing an ever worsening homeless crisis. We've been dealing with this issue for a number of years now, but especially the last few. They're visible in every part of Los Angeles. we combine threats to health, safety, and aesthetic issues with human tragedy everywhere we look. People are very unhappy with this situation, obviously, and they ask me every day, why don't you do something about it? As if everything that we're doing, we know it's not enough, but we can't just magically snap our fingers. This problem has been growing for a number of years, and there's no way to stop it instantly. People will often say, well, if I were elected, I could do it. The problem would be solved. I know how. But when people get in there, they realize this is so complicated and so difficult. And one of the problems is, as we're building housing, we're creating newly homeless people at a higher rate than we're housing them. So there's a lot that needs to be done in this arena. I think what we need to do more of is to find ways that don't involve building more housing to take people off the street. And some of them are simple, some of them are preventative. I'll give you 3 examples, and then I'll take some questions. One is, I found just an efficiency that doesn't cost us much. We've been requiring affordable housing in market rate developments that are large enough, but we weren't keeping any track of them. So some landlords would rent to market rate people, even though they're counted as affordable housing. Some would rent to folks at low income, a low rent, but they might be their cousin going to law school that has no income. But they weren't supplying affordable housing to people with low incomes or who were on the edge of homelessness. So I pushed for years. First, we were told we couldn't track it, it was impossible. A couple people here, a couple people there in buildings. Now we have a database. I've been pushing to create a list of people that should be chosen from. We've almost created that list. So just a relatively easy efficiency, but that should help keep hundreds of people from being on the street. Another one is a number of people wind up on the street because they get evicted, and not with good reason. Sometimes the relatively few landlords that are bad actors will come up with something that's more of a scam, and they'll file for an eviction. And if a tenant is relatively broke and can't afford legal representation, no matter how valid their case, they usually wind up out on the street. So I created a program that's now called Eviction Defense, where we provide some money to nonprofits to represent people in these circumstances. And again, we hope to keep hundreds of people from winding up out on the street. The last example I'll give you is, I think we should focus more on what they call family reunification. And essentially what this means is you interact with every homeless person in the city, you find out which ones would be willing to live with a family member, you get a list of all their family members, you find whether there are any that are willing to take them in, which sometimes they don't think of because maybe their parents threw them out of the house 10 years ago. But their cousin would be devastated to know that they were living on the streets of Los Angeles. So you find someone willing to live with a family member, you find a family member willing to take them in. If they live out of the area, you pay their transportation costs, and you do some virtual counseling to make sure that it sticks and it works out. That whole process costs almost nothing. So rather than having a lonely homeless person in a $700,000 unit that we've built with costly services that we provide, you can actually have a happier homeless person living with their family and providing their counseling from a distance. So another way which some of our nonprofits do this incredibly well, and a lot of the people they get off the street, they do in this fashion, and it works well, and it's humane, and it's quick, and it's inexpensive. Many of our nonprofits don't do it. So why don't we set a standard that everyone has to learn the best practices, and that has to be the first step they focus on until there's nothing else to do on that step. And then look for other things. Look for housing that we have locally, build the housing, do all the things that we can. But we're in a terrible situation. We get a remarkable 207 people on average off the streets every day in the city of Los Angeles, but we add 227. So every day we do great work and dig ourselves a deeper hole. We have to find a way to at least get to the point where every day we're gaining on the problem rather than losing ground.
So Paul, we got about 5 minutes, and then we want to open it up for questions. If you could address ghost guns and corruption at City Hall.
I'll try to do both those in 5 minutes. Ghost guns is something I've been working on for a while. We've had an increased homicide rate for the last few years, although it's true across the country. Part of that is because of ghost guns. And what ghost guns are guns that are sent in pieces. And they're made by a couple manufacturers that do 3D printing. Anyone that is familiar with criminal activity and wants a gun will be able to relatively easily assemble it. It has no serial numbers. It has nothing to track it by. And so it's the perfect gun for a criminal that's not allowed to have a gun. You bypass background checks. You have nothing to identify the gun when it's found. So it's now used very heavily in the city of Los Angeles. 24 murders so far this year, I believe, were committed using ghost guns. I think the LAPD has said around a third of the guns they recover in cases are ghost guns. And alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, I believe it is ATF, says around 40% of the guns they recover in LA are ghost guns. So this is a very serious problem. Councilmember Krikorian and I have introduced legislation both to find out more about the issue and to ban the sale and possession and transfer of ghost guns in the city of Los Angeles.
And speaking of crimes, what's happening at City Hall? Why are there so many bad actors on the city council?
I mean, it's one of those things, I hate to be naive, but I have to say, damned if I know. I mean, each one of these has been shocking and surprising. And Mark Ridley Thomas's was painful. I mean, it's not exactly connected to the city of Los Angeles. His alleged activities were performed while he was a county supervisor and have nothing to do with the city. But the fact that 3 council members have found their way to being indicted for corruption is not something that is anything but an embarrassment to the city and to the council members. I mean, this is horrible for all of us. We're almost embarrassed to be on the city council. This happened, I remember, in the state Senate. I think it was either right when I was done with my term or in the beginning of the period after. Senator Darrell Steinberg was the head of the Senate. And if you talk to anybody that ever served with him, literally the most ethical politician in the whole state. And under his watch, 3 senators were indicted for various kinds of corruption and violations. And it's one of those terrible things. I'm not sure what one could do to stop it. Mark Ridley Thomas's case, I'm not sure there's a solution. Jose Huizar's case, it was proposed to find a way to eliminate contributions from developers. It never happened. We really would have had to create a list of all the people whom we couldn't take money from, or I think a bunch of people would have made mistakes and accidentally been fined for a contribution from someone they didn't know was a developer. But I think something could be done there. And Huizar's was the most egregious. It was shocking, and someone that I thought was a bright and capable colleague and someone who I worked closely with on environmental issues. I never dreamed that someone would have a criminal enterprise where they were asking for $500,000 bribes. I mean, it shows you how naive I am. I always thought if someone was going to ask for a bribe, they'd probably ask for $20,000. The ability to ask for something so egregious never would have even crossed my mind. But that seems to be one category that we could find a way to crack down. It was proposed, it had some supporters, but it has not gone anywhere yet. And that's the one thing I can suggest. Other than that, I mean, a lot of these things, they happen behind closed doors. You have no idea how, and you can't change a person if someone is going to do it. I mean, I don't think of Mark Ridley Thomas as a career criminal as I might have with one of my former colleagues. But clearly he stepped way, way, way over the line to aid his son. And as much as we all want to help our children, I mean, I don't do that kind of thing. And I don't think the majority of our colleagues do either. But I'm not sure I have a way to stop it other than what we painfully did today, which was we suspended someone that has had an incredible lifetime of public service, and we all respected him for that. But we just had to say, we've got to be an example. If you're indicted for a serious level of corruption, you just have to be suspended, as painful as that may be.
Okay, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Matt with the questions.
Okay. Hey, Richard, before I get into the question, I just want to let you know that Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton is going to be joining the call in a little bit, or the Zoom meeting. So I don't know if you want to put him toward the end, or I'm not sure how you want to handle that.
Okay.
So Paul, just to follow up on the on what you just said, as far as you're not sure what can be done, isn't it a little bit more? Isn't that even more naive by you saying that? I was a planning commissioner for the city of Los Angeles for 13 years, and I got some of my planning commissioners got calls to see if we could turn cheeks, to turn our decisions by council members. And it wasn't just the developers, it's a homeowner that writes a council member a check. Why not look at it a little bit more simplistic, Paul, and look at it as the city of Los Angeles has a endemic problem, which is corruption, which is council members, 15 council members, and look at campaign reform as far as leveling the playing field, so that it's not just developers. Developers are an easy target as far as in the people that actually get prosecuted. But, you know, I saw it happen firsthand, and there was nothing that could be done about it. But as a council member, aren't you being a little naive by just saying you're not quite sure what's being done about it? You've been in politics for a long time, Paul.
Well, I mean, number one, you have to take some personal responsibility. I can tell you with 100% certainty, you're never going to see me on this list. Nobody expects to hear about me doing one or another of all the corrupt things that people have done over the years. So, I mean, you have a responsibility as a politician, which some forego. But we've tried to do some things. I think this year will be interesting to see. We've tried to level the playing field with the city making a huge contribution towards candidates' war chests by doing a 6-to-1 match. So up to the first $214 of every contribution, which is relatively modest, it's matched 6-to-1. So, I mean, I'm trying not to campaign, but I'll just note that I'm running for city controller. I have 5 unknown opponents, but I think most of them will be able to raise $80,000 in small contributions from individuals, and they'll get a match of $416,000. So they'll be able to run a very effective campaign without having to do a lot of fundraising from special interests, from people that are that involved. I think it's a step in the right direction. We haven't had elections under this. So I'm hoping that reduces the impact. I mean, every step that we've tried to take over the years I've watched government in general, there are other things that block it. Certainly, we try to do campaign limits, but you can, as we do, and most people agree, you can limit the amount you can spend and the amount you can raise, and keep it under control. But then court cases have said that you can't stop people from contributing if they do it independently. So you can do everything you can to keep special interests involvement less. And then one of them decides they want to beat you, one of them decides they want to help you. Either could happen to me, and there's nothing you can do. So it's difficult. If I heard a solution, and every time I have heard a solution, I've advocated for it. But it seems like it should be easy, but I haven't heard any great ideas that have made it easy.
Okay. Well, again, you're in that position to make it easy, or to see you're on the inside. So, but anyway, let's move on. Jay Weitzler, your mic is unmuted. Did you want to follow up on? I know Richard had touched on what you had put your question in.
I did. Councilmember, I really appreciate, as do we all, your service, and we certainly agree with the fact we don't expect to see you under federal indictment. No question about that. However, at this point, we have 20% of the city council that have been indicted. One has pleaded guilty. Councilman Englander has already pleaded guilty. Councilman Weezer is about ready to go to trial. And we'll see what happens to Councilmember Ridley Thomas. In addition to that, we've got two other council members, Councilman Lee, who's on the verge of perhaps being indicted, and Councilman Curran Price, who's kind of involved in the whole situation. So we have a possibility of 33% of our city council. I feel like I'm back in the 1930s with this kind of city council. So my question is, what is the city council, and I know it's not new at all. What is the city council doing to oversee what the members do? Is it possible to set up something like an oversight commission that has been given by the federal authorities to the police department? Somebody's going to have to look over our city council, because to be quite honest, except for yourself and a couple of others, we feel like we have a bunch of thieves running the hen house. So what plans are there to prevent this from happening in the future?
I can't say there are plans. And I'm not sure even what an oversight committee could do, because I generally think if you decided you want to go on a corrupt path, you're going to find a way. I mean, I wish I had a more brilliant idea. I haven't considered an oversight commission before, so I won't just dismiss it out of hand. I suspect that would do more to look like we're trying to solve the problem. And frankly, for appearances, we need to look as concerned as we are. But I'm not sure that'll solve the problem. Certainly getting money out of campaigns would help. It wouldn't have resolved the Mark Ridley Thomas problem. I'm not sure if it would have resolved the Jose Weezer problem. I mean, there were campaign issues within all the allegations, but the big allegation was selling favors for $500,000 at a shot. And I'm not sure an oversight commission catches that either. And our ethics commission, to be honest with you, I consider pretty worthless. They catch a lot of people in inadvertent ticky-tack errors on their forms, but when they have been brought actual election-changing violations in 2 or 3 cases that I'm aware of, they've generally just thought, well, we can't prevail. We're not even going to go after the people that have committed them. So I'm not sure if we need a stronger commission with more teeth or more willingness to act. Again, I'm open to any suggestion. I'll look at this oversight commission, as long as it's not in the direction of the ethics commission, which provides no true valuable oversight.
Okay. The next question, we have a whole bunch of questions that were emailed and sent into us earlier on about the homelessness issue. And I know Richard and you addressed it or addressed part of it. You've been on the council for a long time. You've been in politics for a long time. Homelessness is not a new thing in Los Angeles. I'm going to summarize a few of these questions, and then we have somebody online, Susan Collins, will ask her own question about homelessness in a second here. But you know, there's comments such as, how do you sleep in your bed at night, driving and seeing all these people on the sidewalks in your neighborhood, in our neighborhood? I, as a real estate agent, and constantly seeing people moving out of the city of Los Angeles and out of the state because of this. I have another question stating that every election cycle, politicians say they're going to come up with a new idea for homelessness and taking care of the problem, and nothing happens. This other person said, how many people in your council district, Paul, have you gotten off the street and provided beds for? So anyways, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Homelessness, people are obviously very, very tired of this issue. So we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on an issue that's not going away. So Susan, you want to go ahead and address your question, and then you can maybe address some of these other questions that were asked.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, hi, thank you so much. And thank you so much for calling on me. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Councilman Koretz, for being here tonight. I enjoyed listening to what you had to say. I noticed, though, that in your ideas on how you think we could change the angle of how we're approaching homelessness, one of the items that you did not mention was additional funding for mental health and addiction. And most people are aware now, and if they're not, they should be, that addiction and mental health are the primary causes. It is not, you know, the high price of rent that has driven people on the street. It is addiction and mental illness. So what would you do? How can we address that? Because that is really a piece that needs to be funded. The other piece that I get so frustrated with NIMBY this, NIMBY that. And the reality is that the NIMBYs have voted in favor of increasing taxes in order to fund these programs. The problem is they haven't been given programs that support the surrounding community. Why don't any of these homeless housing programs, why are they not required to have aggressive community outreach that requires an ongoing community impact statement, and the success that would be, gathered from the data from those community impact statements should be a required portion of that program's success or failure, and tie that to their funding, right? So they should have an aggressive community outreach. All of the surrounding businesses, schools, residents, current residents in the program, prior residents, they should have an ongoing impact statement. And that should be the basis of whether or not the program is good or is a success or not.
Let him answer that.
Sorry.
Boy, there are a million things to say about this. One thing is people always say, well, Ronald Reagan, dismantled the mental health system in California, which is absolutely true. But he's been out of office, 50, 60 years. He's been dead for quite a while now. It's time to stop blaming him and ask the state to take back their full responsibility for funding mental health. And I think we've made some tries, but I think we need, as a council, to really go and strong arm our LA delegation and the governor, and push harder to make this happen. And our controller and everybody else that makes sense be up there and giving it a push that we've never given before. I think that really is a piece. You can't say that one thing is the cause of homelessness, because if you take them apart, and I don't think we've studied it adequately, but there's so many different causes, and you have to address each one individually. One of them is the high cost of housing. I mean, when they had the fire in Woodley Park, I think it was, and there were a lot of people living in the park, and they scattered, and social workers talked to them and got information. Many of them were living there, but they had full-time jobs. They just didn't have full-time jobs that were good enough to pay for housing. So they were actually living in the park. We have to acknowledge that and address it. And some of my suggestions would do that. Some things I'm not waiting for, I'm already working on. I mean, I've been working on this issue in various ways for 25 years. Back when I was in West Hollywood, we created a program called Foundation House. We would take people in, we would try our best to solve their problems. We would then transition them to another side of the facility. We'd give them job training, they'd get jobs, they'd save money, they'd save up first and last month's rent, and they would be back in society when it worked perfectly. I'm not even sure we could do that now, because at the end, I don't know that somebody with a low-paying job actually can find somewhere to live anymore. But that was a concept. That merged with a program in Hollywood to create what's known as PATH, which some of you know of. I helped to create that program some 20 years ago and helped select their primary headquarters, near Vermont and Beverly Boulevard. And they now have 2,500 units. And I thought if they ever hit 2,500 units, they'd take a huge bite out of the problem. But now it's just a little nibble. There's so many steps that we could take, and we need to do everything. Legislatively, I've also been pushing for adaptive reuse of older buildings, reuse of office buildings, which now, especially post-COVID, half of some buildings are empty because people are working remotely, and they may keep working remotely. Some of those buildings could be converted to housing. So I've been working legislatively to allow for that. I mean, there are so many different steps. I think we need to take all of them. The outreach would be nice, but I don't think that is a direct problem in terms of providing more housing for the homeless. It's a problem in terms of mitigating the impacts to the extent that in some places there have been them. I mean, the two HHH projects I haven't been built yet, but very little community opposition. The one bridge housing project I have on La Cienega took a motel that used to be a drug dealing and prostitution den when it was in another district, and has been closed for a number of years and falling apart. It got rehabbed, it got turned into a much nicer looking building, huge improvement for the neighborhood, and you would never even know that 21 families are there. So everything that I'm aware of has had no problems with the community that outreach would have solved.
So
obviously in other districts that's happened, but I don't think that's the biggest problem with homelessness.
So how many, and again, I'm fielding questions that are coming. So how many beds or how many beds have you housed in your district since you've been a council member?
Well, since we've been doing what we've been doing, and with this level of focus, which has only really been the last probably 3 years, I have 2 HHH projects that combined wind up being a little over 100 units. So far, I have 1 bridge housing project with 21 units that serves 21 families. We have 1 in the works on Melrose. We've had a couple safe parking sites, but it's been really difficult because almost every empty lot is taken in CD5. There are very few empty, and those that are there are owned by developers. There are very few properties that people are willing to sell us, or that again haven't been bought out from under us by developers. So we've tried to do everything we can in the district. We've tried to grab every site that's available. My office has constantly driven around, solicited opinions, and we've introduced to the CAO over 70 locations to be considered. And we've only had a handful approved by the city. So I think our standards are a little too tight. I think we make it difficult for the districts that struggle the most to find sites to do it.
Okay. All righty. We're going to move on to a different subject. Melinda Blitz, your microphone should be open shortly. If it's not open already, you emailed a question in. If you could paraphrase it or shorten it a little bit, we're running out of time a little bit here. So Melinda, your mic is open. Unmute yourself, Melinda. Bob, did you unmute her?
I can try.
Okay. There you go. She's unmuted. Melinda, you want to ask your question?
I don't have the question in front of me. Do you have it? You could read it?
Sure. Okay. So they're property owners over on Melrose and they pay an outrageous amount of property tax. You recently voted in favor of defunding the police. Since then, street vendors have taken over the streets. Murders and robberies have increased to the point that customers cannot eat a meal without being mugged. Store owners cannot make a living and homeowners are seeing their property values decreasing. Since you refuse to pass an ordinance to protect us, what are you doing to help people who voted for you into office?
Okay, well, first, some factual stuff. I actually led the effort to not defund the police. When we first started discussing the issue, and we had hundreds of people calling to completely defund the police, I was the one person that constantly stood up and said this was a terrible idea and I would never support it. And I literally got hundreds of people calling into council saying, Paul Koretz, you fucking white supremacist, and other things not quite that polite. My family got hundreds, if not thousands of calls at home saying the same thing. We finally put an answering machine message on that just said, please leave a message, and people thought they were calling somewhere else, and it stopped. When there was a vote in council to refer this to committee to consider a $150 million cut, I was the only one, I believe, that voted against even considering it. Now, ultimately, we wound up with some tough decisions to make in committee. And this was essentially thrown out money. We said, cut $150 million, essentially to spank the police for being police, not because the city was $700 million short, which we were, and throw it out to different community causes, unproven, and see if anything benefits anyone. I worked behind the scenes to make sure some of that money wound up being diverted back into the city budget, which was at the time the best thing that could happen. We had a vote. I didn't want to vote for it, but it was a 2-2 vote. If I hadn't have voted, all the money would have just gone out to random community groups. So I had to cast the third vote. And the one vote that's been interpreted as a vote for defunding the police is there was a vote on the whole budget for the city of Los Angeles. And I mean, I probably regret having voted for the budget because of that misinterpretation. It hadn't occurred to me, and I was surprised that Joe Buscaino and John Lee voted against the budget. Probably if I had thought on my feet a little better, I would have done that too. But I didn't, especially as a member of the budget committee, especially having cut that deal so some of the money could be rescued. But I've been as strongly against any defunding of the police, as strongly for refunding them. I've probably put more of my discretionary funds into additional funding for police overtime in all 4 of the bureaus that cover my district, including the Valley District, than anybody else on council. And if you talk to any leadership in LAPD, they'll tell you, if not the most supportive, I'm certainly awfully close. You can talk to Michael Moore. You can literally talk to anybody.
Okay.
So I'd say totally wrong position.
All right.
I've done everything I can and will continue to see us refund the police and get them up to a reasonable level.
Richard is giving me the hook because it's 8:30. However, we have one more question, and that's from Bob Anderson. And Richard's already trying to give me the hook, but Bob's get his question in.
I'll go quick. Hi, Councilmember.
Hello.
I'm sure you know that they kind of almost finished up the first redistricting map at the commission last night. And hopefully they'll approve it tomorrow night to send to council in a week. Do you have a position on that map? And I'll also ask a question. I've been hearing, I talked to a lot of people, and I've been hearing rumors everywhere from they're going to love the map and accept it to they're going to tear it in 1,000 pieces, jump up and down on it and replace it with a brand new one. Do you have any comment or thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know how much insight I have. I mean, I haven't played any significant role, as we're really not supposed to,
Right.
until it gets to council. My district is reasonably intact. I mean, I'm disappointed to lose Encino. I would be just as happy to keep Encino and gain Sherman Oaks. That doesn't look like it's in the cards. And if people really want a Valley-only district, you know, I'm not going to fight that. But either way would be fine with me. The rest of my district is pretty intact. There was an effort to keep the Orthodox community, which are largely at the East End and Fairfax and the South End and Pico Robertson, all in one district. It looks like my map does that. So from my own selfish perspective of trying to do what my constituents want, I think my district is as close to that as possibly could be, considering I don't have a lot to do with it. So I'm happy for myself with that. There are some council members that I think lost a lot of their districts, and you know, I'm not looking to do that to them. I've heard rumors that this map could be hacked apart in any number of ways. That could happen to my district as well. I mean, I will try to preserve communities and keep them intact as best as I can. But I can't tell how much control I'll have over this process. And frankly, as the one council member that doesn't have to try and preserve his district for himself, I mean, I've heard of proposals that have had me in CD4, along with the entire dense Jewish community in those areas. Since I live in the Fairfax area, you know, more Beverly Grove.
There were some of those, there sure were. Yeah.
That all of those will move into Council District 4. I'm not sure whether the new council member will be well received. I know probably on the issue of support or not for the police, the residents of that area and their new council member would probably not be very in sync on that issue. So that's all I know. I can't predict. I can tell you that the district that you'll be in, according to the current map, and the district that I have would both be perfectly satisfactory for me. But what happens in all those other districts could impact it dramatically.
It doesn't take much in one little area to move the whole thing around, as we've seen.
Exactly. You make one change and it has a ripple effect throughout the whole city. So a complicated process. It could actually wind up very similar to what it is now, or there could be wholesale differences. And right now I couldn't predict which it is.
Well, with that, Councilman, I want to thank you for attending the meeting this evening. We look forward to seeing the audience on the 3rd Wednesday of November. And we look forward to seeing you playing football at the Toy Drive on Sunday, the 5th of December.
I look forward to it.
Okay. With that, I'd like to thank everyone and good night.
Good night.
Good night,
everybody.
Thank you, Councilman.